guys. Welcome to Jackson, Wyoming, of all places. Every day it's a different day, right? I want to talk to you guys a little bit about this picture that I took. Um, and it's not as not like I just took a good picture and that's it. There's a lot of well, anyway, let me do it like that. There we go. And is there a way that I can make this kind of full screen? I wonder. Now doing the opposite of what I wanted to do. Okay, well, anyway. Um, so I just want to talk quickly about this picture. How I took this picture was I wasn't actually looking for a wolf. I wasn't really looking for wildlife. I was looking more at the lie of the land. And I was really coming to the end of the Grand Tetons National Park, the part that you can actually access. And I was looking out over this expanse and I saw that little dot. And so it caught my eye. And there was nowhere to park, but I nevertheless stopped my car actually in the middle of the road. And I say the middle of the road, I mean obviously in my lane, and which is obviously not good, not right, not what you want to do. And then got out and then took this photo. So it was extremely rushed. It was extremely, I don't want to say random, but it wasn't expected. And it was also within the context of kind of danger, the other cars coming on the other side of the road. And, you're not supposed to stop the way that I'd stopped. I then, I took two or three photos with my phone. I then drove fairly quickly to the nearest turn off, turn out, I think they call it. And then it was a really long walk all the way back to where I was. And of course, by the time I got there, the wolf was gone. He'd actually chosen a very good area to go out into the open because it's very hard to actually park and, you know, um, check out the thing. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is actually a very lucky photo because of the odds that were sort of against you. And yeah, the I agree that this is probably the best photo I took today, but it's also the riskiest, the most dangerous, and to some extent the luckiest. I mean, it happened to see what I saw, and amazingly enough, immediately after that, a fox kind of trotted up to us. Um, Literally, while we were standing there talking about, did you see the wolf? A fox trotted up to us. So I don't know, I found that quite weird. This is still unlisted. Damn, I think this video is unlisted. No wonder there's no one in chat. I wonder if I can change that while I'm here. I'm not sure if I can. See if I can. Unlisted. Well, I hope to see some of you in chat. Let's see if anyone's here yet. It is public. Anyway, let me continue. So I'm going to now go to Van Gogh letters, and I really only want to be on here for sort of a short time. Laura, is you here? Good to see you here. Sorry, I actually had this as unlisted. It's been a long day. Definitely been a long day. I'm not going to be a very long, maybe half an hour. I'm starting to feel sleepy, and that's kind of what I want. I kind of do want to feel sleepy. So we'll see how long I can, do this. I really just want to deal with a couple of letters and then I need to get some sleep. Loris, right now it's just you and me. So if you got any questions or comments, let me know. By the way, what I kind of meant to share earlier, um, this stone comes from the Spread Creek area. This stone, I picked the stone up. I don't know, just to take something with me, I guess. Something tangible that I was there. You know. So Terry is also here. Wow, Yvonne's also here. Good to see you guys. Yeah, by the way, Terry, I went to the Cowboy Bar. It's closed. It says temporarily closed, but I thought maybe that's wrong. But I mean, basically, Jackson Hole has shut down. All the skiers have left, and so they've basically shut a lot down. It doesn't really bother me because I'm here for the wildlife and the mountains and the scenery, not really for the jewel, not for the sort of song and dance. But when we come here together, maybe we can, check out some of the that sort of thing. Okay, let me do that. Um, Lynn Lippy is also here. Good to see you. Okay. Thanks for being here, guys, at such short notice. I hope you're having a good Sunday. Um, let's kind of get cracking with letter from Vincent to Theo, dated 8th of August. Now, before I read this letter, I just want to talk a little bit about, if you think about what I did today, let's just go back to me for a second. If you think about what I did today, I'm obviously not painting pictures, but I am in a way an artistic person, and I'm seeing, in a way, paintings within the landscape, and I'm trying to capture them. I think you can see that to some extent on my Instagram. Like, if you look at this image, where is it? Um, what's a good example? Yeah, that's a fairly good example. I'm trying to actually find the art in the actual landscape. The artistic aspect to it. And so, in a way, I'm doing a similar thing to Van Gogh. I'm looking at the landscape, but in a way that's saying, isn't it beautiful? Isn't it great to be alive, right? But it's also within the context of death, and what I mean is, I'm looking at the beauty of the landscape in the context of what happened to Gabby Petito, right? Um, and Vincent van Gogh is his father's died, his uncle has just died. We dealt with that in the previous letter. He is actually ill, but it's also the death in the sense that he can't sell his art. He's not living his best life. In other words, in a way, it's kind of fake. It's like he's saying, guys, this is so awesome. You know what I mean? It's so awesome. Meanwhile, he's struggling to live his best life, right? And in a way, I'm keying into that in the sense that I'm going to, for example, the Grand Tetons. I could have fun. I could go on a snowmobile. I actually still want to do that. I want to ski, but right now I don't think it's a good idea. But what I'm trying to get at is it's this idea of, um, showcasing a beautiful landscape within kind of tragic circumstances, if you know what I mean. Like what happened to Gabby is tragic. And within that, saying, look at this beautiful place. And so I think within that context, you know, um, it's worth thinking about that Van Gogh is trying to communicate the electrified, energized, colorized, landscape, but actually he's trying to, um, resist a not really resist, but he's got a sort of a deadness within that he's got to deal with, and that's not even the right way of saying it. just like a creeping inertia. No one wants to buy his art, and he's got to deal with that. In other words, he's got to manufacture. He's got to kindle a kind of optimism, and that is what we want to look for in his letters. Is that there? Is it realistic? Should he have given up his day job and done something else? Iceland, good to see you. Astrid, good to see you as well. Well, already 14 people in chat. Good to see you. Iceland says, I'm not at work and can enjoy. Iceland, I think we may actually be seeing you in a couple of days. So looking forward to that. Okay, so shall we get cracking on a letter? But I want you to think about what I've just said, this idea of you in this, it is a beautiful landscape, it is an invigorating landscape, it is a healing landscape, but he himself is not living his best life. The landscape is doing pretty well, but he is trying to um, you know uh, become a happier, functional person. Is he succeeding? Right? For all his, like, look at this, look at the story now, look how beautiful this is. For all of that optimism, for all of that creative interpretation, for all of that inspiration, what is the reality? And I mean, that's what makes Story Night such an incredible achievement, is he paints it in the asylum, in this terrible state of despair. He's able to sort of lift himself, certainly in his mind, in his imagination, out of it. And I think the challenge is, if you can do that, great. If you can lift yourself out of despair in your imagination, great. But can you actually practically take yourself out of a particular situation? Like, because I think Vincent needed to solve the problem of, I can't sell my art. And I think part of the problem was he wasn't he wasn't someone who socialized properly, and he wasn't someone who, the people who were supposed to buy his art, they thought they were dealing with a, um, what's the word, tramp and a, you know, oddball kind of thing. So sometimes you've got to change aspects of yourself if the world's not catching on. And I mean, you can say, yeah, but the world caught on 130 years later. Yeah, but I think we want the world to catch on while we're alive, right? What do we need to do to make it easier for the world to catch on to us and us to catch on to the world, right? Okay, so let's get going. My dear Thea, I've just sent off three big drawings as well as some other ones. The little cottage garden done vertically is, I think, the best of the three ones. Is this the cottage done vertically? Um, it says here, what does he say? Under the blue sky, the orange, yellow, red splashes of the flowers take on an amazing brilliance. Haven't we dealt with this? It vibrates like the bouquet by Monticelli. I reproached myself for not painting flowers here. I wanted to paint a poor peasant who bears. Yeah, I think we have actually dealt with this letter. Let's go on to the next one. Is it 9th August? Yeah, that's the one. Letter from Vincent to Theo, 9 August. My dear Theo, thank you very much for sending me the canvas and paint which have just arrived. This time there was 9 francs 80 carriage to pay, so I shan't go and get them out till I get your next letter, having no cash at the moment. So that kind of made me think. I mean, I was thinking about Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie today, and I was just thinking, I mean, it's something I want to deal with separately. But you know, you if you're in Jackson, old Terry will know this. There's so much to do. You can go mountain biking, you can go on a snowmobile, you can go whitewater rafting. I'm not sure if you can do it right now. I suppose there are some places. I guess you can go horseback riding. You can, hang out at restaurants and bars. You can but anyway, there's just many things you can do. And they go and stay in this camp in a very remote area, right? Away from everything in a sense. But the point is, if you come to a place like this, skiing is another thing you can do in the winter. Obviously, they weren't here in winter, but there are a lot of things you can do. And but if you don't have any money, and Gabby and Brian didn't have money, they were relying to some extent on handouts from, and that can be frustrating. It can be frustrating to be in a situation where they're wealthy people or happy people or whatever, and you've come all the way and you there with them, you can't actually participate, right? And that is their tragic entropy they take with them, even though they're alive and the landscape's beautiful and inspiring, and they're trying to live creatively. That's the kind of death that they're carrying with them. We don't have any money. We're limited. We're hamstrung, right? How do you overcome that? And what if one of you can overcome that, but not the other one? Because, for example, you could probably spend a bit of money in Jackson Hole on art and on restaurants and on drinks and on all the souvenirs and things here. Can you afford it? Right. So can you see what I'm saying? It's you in this spectacular landscape and yeah, there's a conversation for that, but you're carrying with you limitations. Like the landscape is saying, you know what? There's great abundance here. You can live this unlimited life. Meanwhile, your life is extremely limited. How do you deal with that? What if you're with someone who wants to spend a lot of money or wants this, but and then you say, yeah, but you can't afford it. You know what I mean? And wasn't that possibly what happened with Gauguin and Van Gogh? Van Gogh was used to living a certain level of starving himself and whereas Gauguin is kind of a hedonist. You see what I'm saying? And so that difference of opinion, that difference of attitude, when you don't have much money, can lead to disaster. So it's one part of that is how do you live within your resources? How do you manage your resources? Do you have the maturity to manage your resources? And I think that's kind of a question we need to ask here is we know what happened with Gabby and Brian. They had limited resources and then they ran out of resources and both of them ended up dead, right? Now we're going to look at Van Gogh and Gauguin. They also have limited resources, but Van Gogh in particular has limited resources. Is he able to manage those resources in the context of, I really am lonely, I really want to socialize, I really want to do what this other person's doing, but I can't actually afford it. But I don't actually sit at home either. And so what does he do? Does he manage his resources? Because if he doesn't, there's going to be disaster. And so what does happen? You get it? Are you getting a sense that you're seeing you're getting an insight not only into Van Gogh but also into Gabby and Brian? It's not just someone's jealous of someone else. It's also the strain of trying to live when you can't, when there are limits, when there are difficulties, right? Okay, thanks, Iceland. Okay, so let's kind of go back to that. Okay, so he's talking about money, and he says, but we must make sure that Tasse, who generally pays the forwarding charges in advance and does not fail to note this prepayment on his bill, has omitted it this time. In the same way, on the last consignment, but one, uh, on the last consignment, but one, I paid blah, 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 blah. So the thing to note here is who is Van Gogh's sponsor? Excuse me, sponsor. Who's his patron? Who is he depending on? And the answer is Thea. And by the same token, who was Gabby depending on? Was she depending on Brian? Was Brian looking after her? Now, if you imagine Gauguin and Vincent van Gogh in all, is Vincent depending on Gauguin? And the answer is kind of, is he's emotionally depending on him. It's like we can have more fun together. Like Gabby is depending on Brian. We can have, I need you to drive the van. I need you to take photos of me, whatever. But the actual person who's running the show is somebody else, which creates another level of uncertainty for everybody. Like, I want to do something. Yeah, but we can't afford it. Yeah, but someone else is paying for it. Yeah, but what are they going to say? You know? And so Gauguin demands certain things, whereas Vincent is used to a certain level. But when Gauguin enters the picture, everything goes to crap, right? Okay, so one of the things that messes everything up, like Vincent is used to running a tight ship, but when he starts drinking, he can't do that anymore. When he starts womanizing all the time, he doesn't have that presence of mind anymore. The same with, I would imagine, with Brian and Gabby, the social media element is like someone getting drunk on something, in my opinion. One person gets drunk and the other one's sober and they don't really like it. Okay, so let's go to the next paragraph. It says, I think it is likely that we're going to have great heat now without wind, since the wind has been blowing for 6 weeks. If so, is a very good thing that I have a supply of paints and canvas, because I already have my eye on half a dozen subjects, especially that little cottage garden that I sent you the drawing of yesterday. I'm thinking about Gauguin a lot, and I'm sure that one way or another, whether it is he who comes here or I who go to him, he and I will like practically the same subjects. And I've no doubt that I could work at Pontavin. And on the other hand, I'm convinced that he would fall in love with the country down here. So something else just to mention very quickly. What also makes a situation like this fraught is if you've been anticipating meeting up with someone else for a long time, that creates just expectations, that creates anticipation, that creates like a damming up of feelings and emotions. And then when life is just different, maybe disappointing, maybe um, I don't know, but just different in some way, then it kind of puts pressure on both people because your expectations are now, anyway, the reality is totally different. That the other person's got to deal with the fact that you had too great expectations, and you've got to also deal with your own disappointment, and that's within this burden situation of I don't have enough money. That's now an emotional burden added to that's disappointment on top of disappointment, right? So I think you had the same with Gabby and Brian, in the sense that Gabby and Brian were planning this van life thing for a long time, for months. And so when they eventually go on it, they've got expectations of the trip, of each other, of everything. And the reality is totally different. And so that's kind of a question that I think we are all faced with. I know I do I do deal with this with myself as a kind of a young man. I always had totally disproportionate expectations, whether it was of a person or a place or whatever. I mean, I actually said to Stephanie, but I mean, it just shows you I'm quite an imaginative person. That Manhattan, I mean, obviously that changed over a while, over the days that I was there. But I said my very, very first impression of Manhattan was that it was actually a little underwhelming. I was expecting the buildings to be 2 or 3 times higher, which is unrealistic, right? But I know that's a silly example, but one of the things we need to do as people, and you need to deal with it as a young person, but maybe you also need to deal with it as an older person. And Van Gogh needs to deal with it in terms of his attitudes to women and men, and I guess art as well. Is you need to adjust your expectations, otherwise you're always disappointed. If you think about that, if you're always disappointed, always dissatisfied, maybe it's because your expectations are always unrealistic. And whose fault is that? I mean, can you imagine if someone has unrealistic expectations of you? That puts unrealistic pressure on you, you know. But it's a recipe for unhappiness, to always be disappointed. And one way just to address that is, okay, I'm just going to lower that scale of my expectations a little. And can you imagine if Brian and Gabby just did that? That they said, you know what, look at how much fun people are having, and look at all these people eating in these restaurants, and they doing that, and they doing that. Yeah, but we're not them. Let's just lower our expectations. If you just did that, then you'd be okay. And didn't Van Gogh do that? Didn't he say, you know what? I can't sell my art. It's okay. I love doing my art, and that's what I'll do. Didn't he kind of deal with how can I put it? Didn't he kind of deal with his disappointment by basically saying it's okay? And isn't that what happened when he was in the asylum? He basically, in the year that he was supposed to go to the World Fair, in the period where there was supposed to be this triumph of him working together with Gauguin. He said it was this huge disaster. Didn't he kind of say, you know what, shit happens, I'm going to try again, and then he did, and that is why the story of Van Gogh is such an injustice, because he did deal with his disappointment. He did deal with um, the slump that he went into. Think about it. I mean, imagine if no matter how it happened, imagine if you lost your ear. You think you could come out of that and just get back to work and, okay, I lost my ear. It's not the end of the world. Let's get back to what needs to happen. I think I'd have a bit of a tough time. And it just shows the resilience, the extraordinary resilience of Van Gogh. And he does seem to come out of a terrible place in the summer of 1890. Yeah, I mean, he seems very resilient to me as well. That's a good question. I think he would be both. I think he'd be sort of amused, but I think he'd also be kind of angry that his story has been appropriated and misappropriated. Lisa, good to see you. Okay, is Gloria gone? Gloria says, I'm tired, I'm going to bed. I'll probably be doing the same in the next half hour. Okay, I kind of need to stop these little diversions. But you get what I'm saying? Anyway, so he says, by the end of the year, supposing he gives you one canvas a month, which would make altogether a dozen a year, bear in mind, by the end of the year, Vincent will be sans one ear and Gauguin will be gone. Supposing he gives you one canvas a month, which would make altogether a dozen a year. Now, don't laugh when I say this. I mean, what happens with um, Gabby and Brian is Gabby and Brian both go on a journey together, right? And then something happens, and Brian comes all the way back. Brian comes all the way back by himself to to Brittany, right? Well, that's actually the same thing that happens with Van Gogh and Gauguin. They are together in Arles. Vincent travels, but I mean, they travel there separately, but they both travel from the north of France to Arles. They're both together in Arles, and then guess what happens? Gauguin returns alone, and Vincent is badly injured. He really nearly died, but he sort of returns alone. This long trip. Immediately after something terrible happens to Vincent, Gauguin skips town and goes all the way north, right? It's the same thing with Brian. It's quite interesting. Arsene says he was also very focused on his art and becoming better despite his environment. Okay, so let's continue. So he says he talks about him making a profit. He says certainly he won't have been the loser, as the money which he will have had from us would be largely made good by the economies that will be possible if we set up house in the studio instead of both of us living in cafes. Besides that, provided we keep on good terms and are determined not to quarrel, we shall be in a stronger position as far as reputation goes. So can you see he's got quite a realistic attitude. He's saying, what we must try not to quarrel. Um, we might be in a stronger position as far as reputation goes. Brian and Gabby probably had the same thing. We let's try not to quarrel. Um, and maybe the social media will work and we'll be in a better position after visiting some of these parks and our Instagram following grows or whatever, right? But the reality is, in terms of Van Gogh, they do quarrel. In terms of Gabby and Brian, they do quarrel, and they can't stop quarreling, and it ends in disaster. Um, the other thing is that Vincent ends up totally, I mean, is so economically destroyed that he loses his home and he goes and lives in an asylum. He kind of checks himself into an asylum. So these are his plans, and he's been planning it for weeks and months. But he ends up checking himself into an asylum, and the whole economic thing is a disaster. Um, he wastes a lot of money on the medical treatment that he needs for his ear and the unnecessary trip Gauguin needs to make to get the hell out of there. And Theo's also got to come all the way from Paris to Arles and then return. All of that is extremely expensive. Anyway, he says, if we each live alone, it means living like madmen or criminals, right? Look at that. In appearance, at any rate, and also a little in reality. I'm happier to feel my old strength returning um, than I ever thought I could be. But can you see at this point, it's August. He's still in a really good place, right? It's still in a really good place. He says, I owe this largely to the people at the restaurant where I've had my meals at the moment, who really are extraordinary. So he's eating well, he's getting exercise, getting plenty of sunshine, his mind's in a good place. And then something is going to go wrong. And the answer is Gauguin. Once Gauguin is part of the equation, Vincent's going to be unable to manage what's going on because he's going to start drinking and he's going to be influenced. He's going to allow himself to be influenced by Gauguin in a way that's not good. He says, certainly I have to pay for it, but it is something you don't find in Paris. Really getting something to eat for your money. And I should very much like to see Gauguin here for a long time. Well, that's not going to happen. Gauguin is going to be there for 2 months. Think about Brian and Gabby. How long did their adventure last? They set off in July. Was it June or July? And it was over by, was it mid-August or late August? To just make sure of that. I think it was the 5th of June or the 5th of July. Oh, in July. Okay. So it was intended to be a 4-month cross-country trip. And how many months did they manage? Just two. Just two, less than 2 months. Guess how long Van Gogh and Gauguin lived together? It was just over 2 months. 2 months seems to be like the period where, think about Amanda Knox and Meredith Curtis, which was also something like that as well, months or 2 months. Okay. What Gruby says about doing without women and eating well is true. For if your very brain and marrow are going into your work, it is pretty sensible not to exhaust yourself more than you must in lovemaking. Do you remember how much he was saying this in the previous letter? He was using the F word over and over and over again. Do you think Gauguin is going to moderate that sort of behavior? Or do you think he's going to aggravate that sort of behavior? He says it's easier to put into practice in the country than in Paris. The desire for women that you catch in Paris, isn't it rather the effect of that very innovation which Gruby is the sworn enemy of than a sign of vigor? So you feel this desire disappearing at the very moment you are yourself again. The root of the evil lies in the constitution itself, in the fatal weakening of families from generation to generation. And besides that, in one's unwholesome job and the dreary life in Paris. The root of the evil certainly lies there, and there's no cure for it. I think that when the day comes for you to set free yourself of those futile accounts and the absurdly complicated management at Goupil's, that's where Theo works, you would gain enormously in influence with the collectors. These complicated systems of management are the very devil. And I think that no brain exists, no temperament, whoever the man on the job is, that does not lose 50% over it. Our uncle was quite right in what he said about it. Much business with few employees and not little business with a lot of them. Unluckily for him, he was himself caught in the wheels. The job of working among people so as to make sales is a job that requires observation and coolness. But if you are forced to give too much attention to the books, you lose your poise. I do want to know exactly how you are. Anyway, provided the impressionists produce good stuff and make friends, there's always a chance and possibility of a more independent position for you later on. And by the way, here was thinking of leaving Goupil and working kind of independently at the time Van Gogh died. And the art experts say that's why he couldn't didn't want to live anymore because he was worried that Theo would struggle if he went on his own and uh, he would be a burden to his brother. Well, here he is actually suggesting it in the first place. Helena, an asylum is um, it's difficult to address this. Um, in France, an asylum was often just a hospital. It wasn't necessary like today. We think of an asylum as exclusively a place where you go if you're mad, right? An insane asylum. And of course, there's seeking asylum that's different in terms of political things. But in that time, I used to know this off the top of my head. Um, in that time, you went to an asylum if you were ill, and you also went to the asylum if you had some kind of mental problem. In other words, they didn't necessarily divorce physical illness from mental illness. You know what I'm saying? So an asylum back then isn't like today's addiction treatment centers. Okay. Jody, good to see you here. Someone did a count. I think it was Martin Bailey. I think they counted how many patients were mentally ill, and then there were others who were just sickly, and I think they also counted how many women there were and things like that. So um, it depends. Often an asylum was just a hospital, if that makes sense. So he says it's a pity that it cannot be from now on. No letter from Russell yet, but now that he has got the drawings, he's bound to reply. This restaurant where I am is very queer. So he's been talking about it quite a lot, saying the food is good. But he says the floor is of grey bitumen. I think it's kind of like cement, like a street pavement, grey paper on the walls, green blinds always drawn, a big green curtain in front of the door, which is always open to stop the dust coming in. So it already has a Velasquez gray, like in the spinning woman. Let's see if we can find that. See if we can see what he's talking about. Not quite sure if it's this. Could be. Or is it this? I think it's a reference to this. Can you see it is quite grey? Diego Velasquez, The Spinners. Quite incredible the way Van Gogh sees something and he immediately he knows his art so well that he is able to say, and this is a painting from um, 1657. I mean, it predates Van Gogh by more than 200 years. Imagine you see something and it's like, oh, Velasquez, right? Yet another version of that looks like the Spinners. Interesting. Quite interesting that it's about weaving. It says the story in paintings was Velasquez spinning or weaving. Anyway, if you guys are interested in that, I'll put a link in chat. Okay. Right, so let's go on. He talks about very narrow, very fierce ray of light through a blind, like the one that slants across Velasquez's picture, is not wanting. Where's the light slanting through the picture? Oh, I guess it's there it is. Can you see? Can you see the light? Can you see the cat over there? The light is kind of coming through there. Do you see that? I quite like this cat. I like that detail. Now, can you imagine that? Can you imagine Van Gogh painting a picture like that? I mean, this is actually beyond Van Gogh's ability. He can't paint this well. So, what makes Van Gogh a more popular artist, a more greater loved artist than, say, Diego Velasquez? And the answer is his story, his struggle. Do you agree with that? His art's not that great. His story is what makes it so great. And there is some of the vigor and turmoil in his art, but it's certainly nothing like this. I mean, just look at all the things going on in this picture. You could blow up certain segments of this picture and would be an artwork within an artwork, as you've just seen. That piece, just the woman, just these two women, the cat and this lady, these figures here. It's like several artworks in one. Anyway, so he says, behind this room in Velasquez Gray, you see the old kitchen, as clean as a Dutch kitchen, with floor of bright red bricks, green vegetables, oak chest, the kitchen range with shining brass things and blue and white tiles, and the big fire a clear orange. And then there are two women waitresses, both in gray, a little like that picture of Provost you have in your place. And you could compare it point for point. In the kitchen, an old woman and a short, fat servant, also in gray, black, white. I don't know if I describe it clearly enough for you, but it's here, and it's pure Velasquez. Now, I want to share something with you that I found pretty fascinating today. So I spent the entire day basically driving around a mountain, right? I spent basically the entire day um, and a lot of other people did as well, where there's a particularly spectacular peak, and you basically have roads snaking all around this peak with little tangents going off it, branching off it. And essentially, I was doing this, but so was everybody else. Essentially, you're looking at the same thing from lots and lots and lots of different angles, from below, from this side of the valley, from that side of the lake, from around the bend, with these trees in front of it, from this perspective, from that perspective, right? And that is actually kind of what art is. It's just looking at the same thing from different perspectives. It's saying, wow, look how awesome this is like this. Look how interesting it is like that. Look how, and I mean, when you, like, what I think is quite a unique way of looking at the Grand Tetons is where you reduce them, where you say, I mean, there the focus isn't actually on the mountain, it's just a background. In terms of this, in terms of this, the mountains are totally reduced, and there's an inversion in a way in terms of the sense of scale. Do you see what I'm saying? But the point I'm trying to make is what what I'm doing is what everyone else was doing, which is you're looking at the same thing, which is to say, and Terry will know this, and people who've been to Jackson Hole will know this, and people who haven't even been there will know this. It's like, this is a spectacular scene. Let's look at it. And all of the tourism is really based around this mountain in a sense. Also the wilderness and a few other things, but and so it ends up being, let's look at the mountain from here and from here and from here and from there. Let's photograph it from here and here and here and there. Let's photograph ourselves with the mountain. Let's, do you see what I'm saying? And art is the same thing. Art is looking at something and saying, how can we frame it? How can we see it? How can we represent it? And then, having done that for the whole day, and then you come back to your hotel and you sort of walk around the shops and you see paintings in the galleries, and you see paintings in some of the stores, and you see postcards, and you see paintings, photos. There's actually a store that says, what we regard photography as a kind of art as well. And all of that is an attempt by lots of different people to say, you know what, there's something incredible out there. Here's one way of looking at it. You know what, there's something out there that's really special. Let's think about it this way. And some people interpret it with a lot of color and a sort of graphic art. Some people interpret it as a t, you buy the t-shirt. Some, like I have, right? There you go. Some people interpret it as, I've taken a photo that's good enough for me. But all of what I'm talking about is the artistic thing, which is trying to see something that everyone can see in a way where you say that resonates with me. And the other things going on as well, paintings and photos of wolves, paintings and photos of uh, bison, paintings and photos of um, uh, what do you call it? Moose. The same thing, and people say that's the version that resonates with me. And I bought a T-shirt with a moose with like um, wearing glasses. It's kind of like mirror glass, like a very cool moose, right? But it's the same thing. There's a reality out there. Everyone knows about it. Everyone has seen it. But someone is going to artistically or creatively or not particularly creatively represent it. That's the artist. In other words, everything I was doing today is exactly what Van Gogh is doing every day. Let me go out into the landscape and show you something. Does it does it does it resonate with you? Does it touch you? Does it talk to you? That's it. People think art is this really terrible, complicated thing. It's basically there's a tree. I'm painting it. Does it speak to you? No, it doesn't. Okay, well, try again. Right. Uh, Bridget says, I think Vincent is so revered not just because of his story, but his art was alive. Yeah, and it is that it's trying to find a way to celebrate, whether you're going to wear the shirt, whether you're going to post the picture, whether you're going to hang the picture on your wall. And I mean, I don't do this often. I honestly don't do this often. I think in my life I've bought one or two artworks. I bought one in Plettenberg Bay of a um what's it called? I think it's called a flycatcher. Can't actually remember what do they call those birds again? Is it a flycatcher? Let me just make sure. Such a colorful bird and beautiful bird. Yeah, the flycatchers in Africa are pretty. Oh no, it's not a flycatcher; it's a bee eater. That's the right word. Yeah. So the picture that I bought. Um, Sorry for this sort of diversion, but it's of this bird, right? Um, so it's not that picture, and it's a painting, but it's of that particular bird, and they actually fly over my home in Africa. When I walk my dog, they sort of fly over my home every every night, like when the sun's setting, like flocks of them, not like one or two, but flocks of them. And when the sun catches them, that they fill with light, and they are very, you can see the green, you can see the yellow high up in the sky, and there's all of these little explosions of color as these flycatchers, come back to roost, but they're also still flying after insects. They're insectivores. So anyway, the point is that today I also bought a photo of the Tetons, and I'm going to put that in my home just because it did mean something to me. It was quite a powerful, meaningful experience today. So yeah, okay. So let's continue. I'm going to skip that part. Then he says, "It isn't all brilliant here." It says, I saw a stable with four coffee colored cows and a calf of the same color. The stable bluish white hung with spiders' webs. The cows very clean and very beautiful, and a great green curtain in the doorway to keep out flies and dust. I must say that is such a random but powerful little snippet that really sketches out just something arbitrary that he saw. And he says, there's gray again in that scene. Velasquez is gray. That's this gray, I guess, that he's talking about. Gray there, gray there, gray there, gray over here. And he's noticing gray in this stable where the cows are. So instead of him seeing people in a restaurant, he's seeing, or people, he's seeing cows instead of a scene like that. He's seeing the walls, the ladder, the floor, but instead of people, he's seeing cows. He says there was such quiet in it. The cafe au lait, the tobacco colors of the cow's hides with the soft bluish gray. So can you believe it? He walks by a stable and he's just caught his what's the word? He's in a kind of a rapture just by the colors he's seeing with cattle in the stable. I mean, that is, if you say, what, Van Gogh wasn't living his best life, or Van Gogh was limited, or Van Gogh was not happy, he is capable of having these incredibly meaningful experiences based on just the most ordinary thing. And that's one way that you can have a happier life. If you say, if things that are ordinary achieve that level of magic, if you know what I mean, where you see God in the details, where you see beauty in something that's ordinary. And I think there's something of that in this particular image, where in a certain sense it's very ordinary, right? It's when you look at it very quickly, you see three branches. I mean, that's basically the focus, what pretends to be the focus of this picture. You see three branches, but then you realize, well, there's a lot more going on. There's the epic scale of the mountains behind them, but and then there's also this tiny little figure of this wolf, and then you get this recognition of proportion, the big and the small, the silhouettes, some that disguise, one silhouette can be lost in another, right? You know what I'm saying? But it's seeing magic in something that is right there in front of you. I do think this is more magical than cows in a barn, though. But the point is that you can actually see and you can recognize, um, you know, incredible things in things that are otherwise regarded as ordinary. Like the stone, the stone that I've got in my hand. It's a stone from this area, but this used to be a building block of the Grand Tetons. And this is, in a way, it's a stone, but it's also a symbol of my day. The symbol of, one thing that really struck me today is in this environment, there's a lot of weathering that's going on. There's a lot of breaking down. The mountains themselves are being torn down. It looks like a pretty scene, but those rivers that sound so harmless and soothing are actually tearing down these mountains, and the result is this. And that's no different to us. We are being torn down by things as well, diseases, bacteria, viruses, sometimes by each other, sometimes by um, you know whatever forces. So there are constant forces of attrition that we've got to resist, right? And sometimes the worst of those forces are in our own minds. And that is why I feel the Van Gogh story is so important, because he wasn't doing that. He wasn't his worst enemy. As much as it looks like he was, he was um, someone. He was a survivor. He was someone with a strong spirit, right? And it's not a credit to us if we can't see that. And I think if we can see that, if you can see that Van Gogh wanted to live, um, and was living quite a good life given what he was up against, and able to pick himself up given what he was up against, then we can too. Like I kind of make the joke quite often. I say I I identify a lot with Van Gogh, but my life's not nearly as difficult as his was. Thanks, Jody. Thanks, Terry. Okay, so let's continue. It's quite a long letter, but we're almost at the end of it. It says, I must go to work. I saw another very quiet and lovely thing the other day. A girl with a coffee tinted skin. If I remember correctly, ash blonde hair, grey eyes, a print bodice of pale pink, under which you could see the breast, shapely, firm, and small. I don't know if I've ever seen Van Gogh write this um, specifically about a woman. Um, this not just specifically, but descriptively. This is quite a detailed description. Coffee tinted skin, ash blonde hair, grey eyes. I mean, as he described any other woman's eyes. And then as he described any other woman's breasts. He says, this against the emerald leaves of some fig trees, a woman as simple as the herds, every line of her virgin. So I don't know, it seems like he's um, infatuated. It seems like he saw someone attractive, but it does describe her as a girl, not a woman, not a it seems like it was quite a young. Bear in mind, he's 35 years old. Anyway, and then he says, it isn't altogether impossible that I shall get her to pose in the open air, and her mother too, a gardener's wife, earth color, dressed just then in soiled yellow and faded blue. The girl's coffee-tinted complexion was darker than the pink of her bodice. The mother was amazing, the figure in dirty yellow and faded blue, standing out in strong sunlight against a square of brilliant snow white and citron yellow flowers. A perfect Vandermeer of Delft, you see. It's not a bad place to south. Ever yours, Vincent. So would you agree with me that Van Gogh is actually not only in a good place physically, but he's in quite a good place mentally? He's I don't know if I would say he's happy, but he's certainly very functional, and he seems to be very um, not just inspired, but kind of captivated, right? He's appreciating cows in a barn. He's noticing people around him. He's also appreciative of the landscape, right? Anyway, let's see how long this letter is. I don't think I'm going to read this letter. It's just too long. So uh, this has been an hour. I think that's sufficient. I'd like to read at least another letter, but I've got to get cracking tomorrow. I don't want to have too late at night, but I hope you found this worthwhile for an hour. A little bit of an impromptu session. Let's deal with a couple of your comments. Uh, Bridget says, I'd agree he's on the ball and alive. Jodie says, oh, yeah, but sorry. Alina says, yes, that's why when I take a picture, I try to capture something unique. You know that when you photograph, you let me put it this way. If you say something like, I'm not going to take a single photo, I'm just going to try and absorb everything, right? I'm not going to, I'm going to leave my camera at home, or I'm going to, you know, they say that they actually did a study of this, and they said when when someone goes into an environment, they take photos, their memory of all of that is a lot better than when they just simply walk and they say, "Oh, I'm absorbing that and I'm absorbing that." I'm certainly not saying take a photo of absolutely everything and then let that be your memory. Like there is a place and a moment, like in the what's that? The Something Life of Walter Mitty. The How did that movie go? You know that scene where Sean Penn had gone all the way up into like the Karakoram Himalayas and he's about to photograph a snow leopard. And Walter Mitty sort of comes up and he says, there he is, there's the snow leopard. And he says, I'm not going to take a photo, I'm going to enjoy this moment. Um, there is sometimes a time to do that. In fact, I did that with a fox today where I had my camera and I was just like looking at the fox. I mean, I did record a little bit of video, but um, I kind of um, was not in a let me take photos mode when I saw that fox. It was yeah, actually quite a weird comparison, the Walter Mitty thing and that fox. actually quite interesting. What's that movie called again? So it's the Something Life of Walter Mitty. The Secret Life. Yeah, that's it. Quite a good film, right? Okay. Let's. Sorry about that. I'm not quite sure what's going on. Or maybe it's a cue to go. Did seem to freeze. Oh, is your son in Cheyenne? How do I say that? Can you tell us more about the wolf? Um, just that I was not looking for it. I was driving and I there was this little opening in a short opening in the tree line, and then I did see what I thought was a wolf. And because it's such an extraordinary thing to see, I did literally stop. You couldn't. There was no shoulder, so I had to stop where I was, and I realized there was a risk, and I actually got out my vehicle, um, with my phone, and there was really like half a second, it was very, very quick that I had to take the picture. And then I tried to drive very quickly to the next turnout, and it was just a really long way away. And and then I grabbed my camera with a very long lens, and I quickly started walking. And other people, there was a couple from Tennessee and another girl who also saw the wolf, and we all of us agreed that it was a wolf. I mean, it wasn't a fox, for example. Wolves are bigger than not that sort of brown, gold, tan color. And so, yeah, and so all of us walked back down, and then by the time we got there, the wolf was gone. So what was unfortunate was you could see the wolf, but you couldn't just stop there. You couldn't stop there and really follow him and absorb it. You just had this really short moment. So the wolf chose a great spot to be seen because you couldn't be there in a sense. Laura says, yeah. Well, can I tell you when Lisa and I were in Yellowstone, we saw a couple of wolves, but they were like dots, and even through like a kind of a telescope, sorry, even through a telescope, they were barely the size of the wolf you see in the picture that I took. So I don't know. I consider that very fortuitous, definitely. So the picture I took of the wolf that you see was taken by my with my cell phone, right? Not with a camera, not zooming in with a telephoto lens. So it is quite special. Yeah, seems like it. Okay, guys. Hope you've enjoyed this session. I'll try and do another one in 2 or 3 days. Obviously, I'll do the next one from Idaho. Um, Next weekend, I'm probably going to do another trip as well. Where do you think I should go? Where should I go on the next trip? I'm also looking forward to seeing Terry and some others on this channel. So looking forward to that. Okay. Oh, also quite good news. Team Peachtree's 51, sounds like a lot actually, but it's 51 hours from being monetized. So far it's at 3,949 hours have been watched. After I've got another 51 hours, then I'll be able to monetize this channel, which will be, you know, good. Will be good. I'll try and also put Yellowstone on, like just Yellowstone onto Team Peachtree, and then like the Grand Tetons on Team Peachtree as well, through the course of the coming week. Okay. I also want to do a thing, my biggest travel boo-boo so far. The list is definitely growing. Iceland says, I hope you keep exploring Wyoming and the West Coast. Or definitely will be exploring the West Coast. Yeah, there is a lot to see. Okay, thanks, guys. You guys must have a great week. I hope you've had a good weekend. Mine's been pretty good. Um, and keep weaving. And oh, by the way, I've heard that the peach trees at my home, the one on the left, the one that has been growing in the sun, is already losing its leaves. It's already turning yellow. And the weird thing is, um, yeah, the one that's been in the sun is losing its leaves first, which I wouldn't have predicted. So quite interesting how both trees have got a different strategy. Okay, that's it from me. I'll check in with you guys a little bit later. Hope you're enjoying this content. I'll try and in future do another little video segment if I'm in an extraordinary setting and inspiration strikes. I'll try and do that again. Okay, guys. Take care. Sleep well. See you guys next time. Ciao. Yes, end broadcast.